In this video, we're going to configure our Bitnami EC2 instance to make sure it's up to date and ready to host Django. Depending on which AMI you chose to install, our server configuration needs will be different. For users who chose to install the Bitnami configuration, so much of the necessary work has been done for us. As you can see from the marketplace documentation, Apache, Python, Django, MySQL, PostgreSQL, ModWSGI, pip, curl, and other tools have all already been installed for us, so we've gotten a huge head start. We'll still want to configure the server to serve our projects from the root URL, set up our database for remote login, and then make sure that the version of Django that's included is up to date. And we should be in a great position to transfer our project files and get ready for production. Let's get started. As I mentioned, by default, Bitnami shows a landing page at the root address, and you have to add a prefix to get to your project page. Let me pull up AWS to get our server's IP address to remind you of this. As you can see, to get to our project, you have to type the keyword project after the root URL. And that's not going to work very well for a real site, so we're going to need to modify our config files to change this. Let's open up FileZilla and connect to our Bitnami instance. If we navigate to the Django projects directory, we'll see our default project. In this default project directory, which happens to also be named project, you'll see a conf file, which stands for configuration. Bitnami ships with 3 config files: httpd-prefix, -app, and -vhost. I'll be honest with you, the modification that we actually need to perform is really simple. But instead of just telling you what to type, I'm going to quickly go over our Apache server configuration for a second for those who may want to understand the process a bit further. But if you want to skip that, go ahead. Okay, Bitnami uses Apache by default, and the main configuration file that Apache uses is called a httpd-conf file, which you can find here. opt bitnami apache 2 conf http.conf. Perfect. Let's open this file by right-clicking it and selecting view/edit. At the bottom of the page, you'll notice that Bitnami has added a few references to other configuration files, which includes these other documents into the main Apache config file. There are many files included, but let's take a look at the bitnami.conf file. As you can see, this file contains a reference for bitnami-apps.prefix and then bitnami-apps-vhost. So let's open up these files to see what's being added from there. Okay, bitnami.apps.prefix contains another reference to our config file in our project folder. So this is really important to note. When we make a change to our bitnami-prefix config file in our project folder, it's going to add it to Apache's configuration, but that's only because of this line right here that references it. That means that if you wanted to add another project to a directory outside of this project directory, or you wanted to rename the project directory to not be called project, you would need to modify this file here to include the new location of any new config files that you're adding with a different path. Okay, now that you have a basic understanding of how Apache is being configured by Bitnami, let's go back to our project directory's config files, focusing on the prefix file that was referenced. As you can see, the only line in this file is a reference to another file. Okay, that's fine. Let's open this file then. And here you go. This file contains the config information that we'll need. At the bottom of this file, you'll see that an alias, or WSGI script alias, that was created between the project folder and the WSGI file inside the project folder. We're going to want to change this alias so that it's simply the root directory without the prefix. Boom. After hitting save, a pop-up from FileZilla will ask if we'd like to update this file on the server, which we do. But for these changes to take effect, we're going to need to restart Apache. But before we do, I'm going to take a quick peek inside our vhost file. Virtual hosts are a way for you to use one server to host multiple projects, among other things. So if you wanted to add multiple projects, you could include the project virtual host config file in the same way that the app's prefix file is used, and then add your virtual host there. So adding multiple projects via virtual host is a bit out of the focus of this course, but I wanted to explain how advanced users could refigure these files to their needs. So feel free to ask me about this in the discussion panel. But okay, back to restarting our server. We'll need to log into our instance via SSH. I forget my server's IP address again, so I'm going to copy it from the dashboard really quickly. And then I'm going to type the Bitnami script to restart Apache, which is located in the opt Bitnami directory. And you'll just want to keep this command stored somewhere to help you remember it. Let's test our root URL in the browser now. And there you go. Our server now displays the included Bitnami project at the root URL. And if we add the word project, it's no longer supported, which is exactly as it should be. Next, let's update Django. You can do that by typing the following command: sudo pip install upgrade Django and install option. And note the install option that we included, since that's where Django is located on our machine. Opt Bitnami apps Django. Great. Next, let's make sure that we can log into our database. Note that I'm going to be setting up my SQL, but the process will be completely analogous for PostgreSQL. Just make sure that you add a rule for Postgres from the security group so that you can access it. And if you have any problems, feel free to reset your Postgres password by following the information here, or feel free to ask me a question in the discussion section. Okay, to log into MySQL, we'll type the following: sudo mysql-u root-p. Note that Bitnami could have created other default users besides root, but I'm not sure what kind of access they have, so let's just pull out the big guns and log in as the super user root. But what's our root password? Well, we're going to have to go back to our EC dashboard to find that. If you select your instance and go to the Actions dropdown, you'll see Instance Settings. Once there, you'll see Get System Log, which will have the log of the Bitnami instance. Our root password should have been logged here upon creation, So let's look for it. Aha, here it is. Let's use that. Oh, whoops, it didn't work. Let me make sure I copied it correctly by pasting it into the URL bar. Yeah, crap, as I expected, it didn't copy. Let's try again. I'm going to copy and paste this password into the URL bar just to be safe. Okay, that looks good. Let's try this again. And boom, we're in. Now this is an optional task, but I'm going to set up remote logging with my favorite SQL GUI, SQL Pro, because that's going to be way easier for me to manage over time. Like I said, I'm going to use SQL Pro, which you can download via simple Google search, but this process will be completely analogous for MySQL Workbench users. If this is something that people are having trouble with on MySQL Workbench, don't fret, just ask me a question in the discussion panel and I'll upload an additional video with this tool as well. Okay, I'm going to select to SSH into our machine since we have our security key. For SSH host, we'll copy the IP address of our instance. And for user, we'll use our SSH user Bitnami. And for the password, we'll use our secure key that we downloaded. This is just like the FTP settings. Okay, and since we're tunneling into our machine, our MySQL host will be the local host, or 127.0.0.1. For user, we'll use root, and password, we'll copy in the root password from the system log, just like the command line. Perfect. We're in. Now we can view, create, or delete databases and tables and users on our server from the comfort of a graphical user interface from our local machine. This instance is all set up and ready for our project files. So in this video, we uploaded and reconfigured our Bitnami instance, learned about our Apache configuration files, modified them so that our project is at the root URL, and tested our database for internal and remote access. In the next video, I'm going to configure an Ubuntu server that was not pre-configured with Bitnami.